It started because I was living in a cooperative house and started the garden there, and the garden just kept getting bigger and bigger. I mean, it started as a hobby that got just ridiculously out of control. It's like a sickness. The Soners are we're very close with them, and John and I in particular. That dude is above and beyond one of the best people on the planet, and more responsible for me farming than me, because he made it possible. You know, he loaned me every piece of equipment, held my hand through every step, and was like, "Hey, it's Thursday, plant your strawberries." And I didn't just add that word for flair. I don't know if you've ever talked to John, but as a former fisherman, he really does have the mouth of a sailor. He's truly like a farming hero. He should be inspiration for all young farmers, not to mention he's like single-handedly responsible for keeping half of them in business. I don't own the land. I have a long-term lease on it. It's a friend's family's land, and they wanted to be sure that it was in good hands, so they actually, this girl who started as a volunteer on my farm one day was like, "Hey, I want to talk to you about something." I was like, "Oh God, here we go." Thinking, you know, she's like, "I've got this land," and I thought it was going to be like a 4x4 plot in Durham. We came up here, and I was like, felt like we were driving for like 2.5 days. We both got what we wanted. She gets a long-term steward who, you know, takes care of the land, watches out for it, and grows organically. I get a secure something in my hand that says I can't be kicked off after 2 years or whatever, so that I can actually invest time. Yeah, 40 years. Figure by the time I'm 70, if I'm still doing this, there's problems. So Kelly and I wrote the grant to create a tool co-op for 10 small farms. So we got a grant from RAFI, which is Rural Advancement Foundation International, but it bought that manure spreader and that trailer over there, and the trailer gets all the pieces of equipment we bought from farm to farm. So we bought a vacuum sealer, a harrow, a plastic mulch layer, a bush hog, a tiller, you know, a hiller, a bedder. Even if you're not in the co-op forever, this gives you a leg up, and it saves you, you know, 10 grand your first couple of years, which are probably the most vital. Right now, all of our farmers are first generation. They're all, I think everyone is organic, or, you know, everyone's at least, you know, sustainably growing. Person County, it's a sea of conventional farming, you know, and you hear the tractors running and you see the tobacco on every corner, and it's like, at what point is it no longer food when you're growing like a toxic sludge? At some point it's like, you're not really farming, you're actually just sitting on a tractor pushing buttons and dispersing chemicals. You're more of like a chemist slash driver than a farmer. For the USDA, a farmer is someone who grows corn, wheat, and soy, and what I am is a specialty grower, even though I grow things that you eat. So all the tomatoes are over there, and then you've got melons and winter squash, summer squash. Then this whole section of ground that we're digging out is potatoes. These are called all blue, or no, Purple Majesty. It's blue all the way through. You know, the Peruvians have like 800 kinds. I just limited it to 8 because I'm not Peruvian. We plant out about 500 pounds, and so we pull in anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 pounds. So this is my second year out here, and it always seems like when you go from field to like, this was pasture, and the grasshoppers and things are just insane. I mean, squash beetles are insane. So my pest load is a little, well, it was bad this year. It was really bad the first year out here. And I feel like once you get your soil up and get your beneficials up, like that 2 rows there are all perennials, so that's like beneficial insect habitat that I can cut for cut flowers. But the point of it is to, like, you know, leave attractants. And what we're trying to do is get stuff tilled in as soon as we're done using it. Till it in, break the pest life cycle. Then chickens would be a really good re-addition. I plant in 1/4 acre blocks, and then the chickens go on 1/4 acre blocks. The idea, the system would be, as soon as I'm done in this section, I put them in here. They eat all the harlequin bugs and cabbage moth larvae, and they can eat on the green stuff, you know, and then fertilize it, reduce that pest load. Then I move them off, plant my cover crop, and then next season, when I try to get back in it, you know, ideally the pest load would be down, the weed seed load would be down. Not to mention they're pooping in there, so it's kind of like free fertilizer. This is like some decrepit white clay. This is the sorriest soil I've ever seen in my life. But every year it'll get better, and every cover crop will add, you know, tons and tons of organic matter to it. So hopefully one day, probably around the time I'm 70, I'm thinking about being like a, you know, jet ski enthusiast or whatever you do at 70. The soil will be good enough. I don't ever want to do anything for the rest of my life. I want to do something new like every 15 minutes. So, no, once I master it, then I'll switch careers, because it'll be boring then. But it's fun for now.
Are there other things you want to do besides farm? Like,
oh yeah, like
what would be your other
Coke
career?
dealer, stripper. Yeah, there's like a whole list of things.